All right.
Are you there? Okay. I have that little issue when I try to go live. I have to go through those steps.
No, we're live. We are live. Hola, hola, hola. Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 3 of Coffee and Cream, Queens of Conversation. Being a Black person living in America feels increasingly difficult. We are trying to survive 2 deadly viruses at the same time, COVID-19 and racism. And I am tired. I'm very tired, and I know you must be too. Welcome. I am Alberta Bell, Coffee.
And I'm Tiffany Davis, Cream.
And together we are Queens of Conversation.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for joining us today for Friday Happy Hour. We had our first discussion of pandemics, politics, and police last week, and due to such a high response of feedback and questions, we felt the need to do a part 2. So tonight's discussion, it's going to be the same, but politics is going to be the epicenter. We have another powerhouse panel and 1 returning guest. And I feel the same way that Alberta feels. It's overwhelming and surreal. And so with that, we're bringing our hearts, we're bringing our minds to this call. Our intro is long, guys, but it's so important because it not only highlights our panelists' achievements and accolades, but it speaks as the prelude to the height and breadth of what they're going to bring to our conversation. And ultimately, our hope for tonight is for you all to see the importance of our people's engagement in politics. So without further ado, let me share the expert of panelists who will be conversing with us this evening. Panelists, please raise your hand when I say your name. Judge Aretha V. Blake. Judge Blake serves as a district court judge in North Carolina's 26th Judicial District. Judge Blake is a certified juvenile court judge presiding over cases involving youth who have been abused, neglected, or are without caregivers, and youth who are involved in the criminal justice system. Prior to juvenile court, Judge Blake presided in family court, addressing issues impacting families and children throughout the community. She presides over the Family Treatment Court, which provides targeted services to parents with substance use disorders and whose children are in foster care. Judge Blake is a judicial liaison to the Mecklenburg County Youth Coalition, judicial lead for the Model Court Committee, and liaison for the Mecklenburg County Bar's Juvenile Division. A native of rural Johns Island, South Carolina, Judge Blake is an honors graduate of the University of Georgia School of Law, where she was a member of the Georgia Law Review. She also graduated with honors from Florida State University with a degree in psychology and was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa. She is the past president of the Mecklenburg Bar Foundation, the first African American to serve in this position, and served on the board and/or executive committee of the Mecklenburg Bar Foundation for a decade. She serves and has served over many committees. Judge Blake has been recognized as one of Charlotte's 50 most influential women by the Mecklenburg Times as a leader in the law, an emerging legal leader by North Carolina Lawyers Weekly, twice as a rising star by North Carolina Super Lawyers Magazine, and as legal elite by Business North Carolina Magazine. In recognition of her community and pro bono efforts to serve children, she received the YMCA of Greater Charlotte George Williams Award, the North Carolina Bar Association Citizens Lawyer Award, the Mecklenburg County Bar Association Small Firm Pro Bono Award, and the Council for Children's Rights Small Law Firm of the Year Award. Judge Blake is also a recipient of the Black Political Caucus Community Service Award, the McCrory YMCA's Drum Major Award, and the Career Mastered Leadership in Action Award. Next we have Councilman Moody. Hey, Delvin. A proud lifelong resident of Utica and an advocate for young people. Reared in church, Delvin felt called to the service of others and helping his community. He is a compassionate young leader who understands the importance of unity and hope. He graduated from the University of Rochester, where he obtained a dual bachelor's degree with high honors distinction in religion and political science. He is currently getting his master's at the prestigious Colgate University in religion, which after he attends to get a PhD. He has been active in numerous organizations on various topics, from the NAAC to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee and the United Nations, to name a few. He served as national chairman of the National Black Action Committee, state treasurer of the New York State Young Democrats, and founder of the Young Christians Network. Delvin currently is the youngest African-American elected official in New York State and the youngest councilman in the history of Utica, New York. Yes.
Ooh.
Next, we have Diane Taylor. Diane Taylor is a wife and mother and entrepreneur, originally from upstate New York, Utica. Ms. Taylor has over 7 years of experience in broadcast journalism in television, radio, and newspaper mediums. She has a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from Morgan State University and a master's in technical and professional communications from East Carolina University. Ms. Taylor moved to North Carolina to pursue a career in public relations and public health and met her husband, Garrett. And where she met her husband, Garrett. After years as a certified substance abuse prevention professional, Ms. Taylor added author to her repertoire. Her book, A Game of Faith, the story of Negro League baseball player Carl Long in 2013 was the beginning of her business, Taylor Made Publishing. Taylor Made Publishing, LLC is a full-service book publishing company that specializes in helping steer authors from manuscript to print. Their focus is diverse children's literature and has garnered much success, including featured authors at Essence, Yahoo News, Today's Show Online, Huffington Post, Teen Vogue, and a host of others. Increasing literacy among young minority readers is at the forefront of everything Taylor Made creates. They also assist countless of celebrities in fulfilling their self-publishing dreams, including reality television stars, former NFL players, and a host of others. In addition to her publishing business, Ms. Taylor is a community advocate and volunteers to serve on numerous boards, lending her expertise to be in the change she wishes to see in her community. Ms. Taylor currently resides in Greenville, North Carolina, with her husband, Garrett, and their 2 children, Morgan and Garrett M. Yay. Next, we have Larry Tanore, Jr. Larry. Larry was born and raised in the Cornhill section of Utica, New York. He attended Utica Public Schools, graduating from Proctor Senior High School in 1997. After graduation, Larry went to Florida to attend St. Petersburg College in Clearwater, Florida. After college, Tanore returned to Utica and immediately got active in the community, after running a close race for city council at 23 years old. Tanore was appointed Director of Marketing for the city of Utica in 2004. 2007, Tanore ran for Oneida County legislator in the Cornhill District against a 20-year incumbent. Building on his community service and long ties to the community, Tanore was elected with 56% of the vote. During his time as legislator, Tanore made diversity and community inclusion his main priority. He voted against over 100 executive appoints, vowing to not appoint anyone to local boards and commissions until they start reflecting the diversity of our community. He believes strongly that real change starts when we give those in the community a seat at the table so they can start making decisions for themselves about how resources are allocated to their community. Today, Tanore lives with his fiance and works in finance for a Fortune 50 insurance company. Next, we have Isaiah Wright. Oh, sorry. Isaiah. All right, okay. Isaiah is an 18-year-old recent high school graduate. He's attending Georgia Southern this fall, majoring in biology with plans on becoming an optometrist. He has lived in 6 different states, attended 3 high schools, and spent 4 years overseas, which gives him a diverse and unique perspective on human relations. Next, we have Patrick Johnson. Patrick Johnson is the founder and director of the Hoops and Dreams Project. The mission is empowering and rebuilding Black America. This is a program that Mr. Johnson started in 2002, using the game of basketball to draw attention to gun violence in Black communities and the importance of education, restoring unity in the Black communities of America, and all of the issues that impact Black people. In 2005, Patrick started a program known as New Life Institute. This is the classroom version of Hoops and Dreams. And New Life Institute addresses life skills, including how to manage your anger, positive thinking, self-confidence, alternatives to violence, morals, values, and spirituality, and much more. The primary purpose of the Hoops and Dreams Project and New Life Institute is to raise the consciousness of Black people about what must be done to enhance the quality of life in the lives of Black people. Patrick is currently also the program director of Save Our Streets. This is a program under the Oneida County District Attorney's Office designed to address gun violence in the city of Utica and provide counsel, direction, jobs, and other resources to men, women, and children who in some capacity have been affected by gun violence in the community. While all of the above is critically important, Patrick's expertise lies in addressing America's racism. Mr. Johnson has been given lectures, keynote speeches, and workshops on race relations since 2001. He has worked with law enforcement, colleges, corporations, and people from various other professions, facilitating discussions and thought about the devastation of white racism and its impact to the body, mind, and spirit of Black people. Thank you, Patrick. Next, we have Jarrod Bryson. Jarrod is a husband, father of an almost 6-month-old baby boy. He's a biologist and a student of history. He was born and raised in Baltimore City and holds undergraduate degrees in biology and African American and African studies from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and a PhD from the University of Georgia. He completed postdoctoral work at the University of Pennsylvania, centered around preclinical modeling of immune system recovery following preconditioning, which is chemotherapy and radiation for bone marrow transplants. He now works in the biotech industry as a flow cytometry specialist with a company whose mission is to make cancer history. He currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia with his wife, Dana, and son, David, and is actively engaged in Baltimore and Atlanta politics. Give a round of applause for our panel. And without further ado, Kurt Coffee.
Thank you so much for participating in this panel. As of June 5th, 2020, according to the CDC, there has been 20,555 new cases of COVID-19 and a total of 1,035 new deaths. And with all this protesting and civil unrest, is the pandemic over, or was the real concern exaggerated? I'm going to go with Dr. Gerard Bryson. Is this pandemic over? You're on mute. I'll unmute you. Okay.
Yeah, I would say the pandemic is certainly not over. Many experts would say that we're in the second or third inning of the pandemic. And if you know anything about baseball, a normal game is about 9 innings. Right now, we're right at about 106,000 deaths in the U.S. And this is out of about 2 million people who were infected. I think if you look at the stats over the last 24 hours, probably about 1,000 people have died from the coronavirus, and we're seeing an uptick in cases in about 21 states. So I'd say the pandemic is certainly not over. I think we're still in these phases that were described by the task force, and that's basically 3 phases to opening the government. It looks like most states are moving into phase 2, and in phase 2, we're basically recommending that people still practice social distancing. In phase 1, it was they wanted you to try to limit your interactions and gatherings to about 10 people or so. So in phase 2, they're suggesting that we limit those social settings to no more than 50 people, and in those cases still practice social distancing and wear a mask to prevent potentially infecting other people.
Thank you so much. Diane, do you feel like that the pandemic concerns were exaggerated at all?
That's a great question. Having been in media for decades, I can tell you that there are certain instances where the media does exaggerate situations, but this is not one. Yeah. I do have an opportunity to serve our community as a board of trustee at Vidant Hospitals, which covers 23 counties here in North Carolina. And I can tell you that we opened up or moved into phase 2 about 2 weeks ago, and we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of cases, positive cases of COVID. It is a real thing. The lack of education, particularly in our community, is really, that and pre-existing conditions, is really taking a big toll on African-American communities throughout the country. And, I would be less than who I am to say that I am not worried about the fact we held graduations here today in our city. While the students did have masks, many of the attendees did not. So it is troubling. We've also, of course, been involved with the protests, which I'm sure we'll get to. So I don't see the lack of concern that I would like to see from our community members. And I am knowing the number of cases and the fact that the protest, while important, has taken over our media, which means it is now not on the top of everyone's mind, is scary.
Thank you so much. Isaiah, being that you're our teen expert here, your age group, do you think this pandemic was exaggerated? You're on mute, but I can unmute you. Hold on.
I think a lot of people like my age blew it off when it first started. Like they thought it was like a joke or whatever, and like they was like still going to parties and going to the beach and drink. But I don't know. What was the question?
Do you think the pandemic was exaggerated?
Oh, exaggerated. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's like getting people sick and getting people killed and stuff. So it's like should be taken serious. Like it's like real bad. But like some people think it's over. They think it's like done for right now. But I don't think so.
So why didn't your age group take it serious?
We don't really take nothing serious. Like on Twitter, on Instagram, everything is just jokes. So it's like this is one more thing to joke about,
At least you're honest. Thank you so much, Larry. Same question.
Okay, yeah, I echo what some of the sentiments Diane said. I think there's what scares me most is the politicizing of every issue nowadays in the media, and how you become one side has to take a stance and dig in, the other side has to take a stance and dig in. And unfortunately, the people that are hurting are the regular people in the community, and disproportionately, people in the African American community are hurting. And disproportionately, those are people that are lower income, don't have the resources, the access to the resources needed, to the education needed. And unfortunately, in the meantime, we have the media and our leaders and politicians fighting over it. It scares me. Yeah, I obviously I'm not a doctor on this. There's more qualified than me, but it worries me a lot that there's going to be another second wave. I read today where certain countries that were kind of, the Middle East being one of them, that their numbers are actually increasing exponentially right now, as a lot of people are thinking it's over and we're being sidetracked here. So yeah, it absolutely worries me.
All right, thank you. Patrick? You're on mute, hold on. Gotta unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
Testing, 1, 2.
There
Can
you
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank you and Tiffany for being wonderful hostesses, and just want to say hello to all the distinguished panelists. And I think that what you're doing in terms of raising consciousness is super. In terms of the question, I'm noticing a lot of things like a lot of people, and I don't think it's exaggerated. I think the danger and the insidiousness of this pandemic is that the virus is invisible and it's unfamiliar to us. So it's easy for people to, putting it in simplistic terms, perhaps, to forget what the experts, the doctors, the scientists are suggesting and recommending that we do, which is some of the basic things, washing our hands extra times than what we typically would. The physical distancing is imperative. And I think that we don't really give it value until someone close to us or someone we're familiar with gets sick or worse. And perhaps we're not giving it the attention that it deserves. And I'm going to be pointed in saying that perhaps for people of color, many of us are so overwhelmed, and I'm even going to maybe take into account what Zay said with younger people. It's just in that age group, with all due respect, and this is certainly not to stroke a brush for all young people, but it's a time in their life where they're looking for other kinds of extracurricular activities. And so for some, not all, but virus be damned. So just a perspective.
Thank you. Judge Blake?
Good evening, everyone, and so honored to be here with all of you. I agree with much of what has already been said, and so I don't want to kind of keep repeating it, but I do not believe that it was exaggerated. I think to some it may have seemed that way, much to Patrick's point, because we didn't know anything about the virus, because we didn't understand it, we didn't know how it was transmitted. And so very early on, there was some very aggressive media around it, some very aggressive stances taken in some states that wanted to protect us from the unknown. Because it was unknown, we couldn't judge at that time, looking forward, whether or not those steps and those articles and that coverage was reasonable. Looking backwards now, with over 100,000 people who have passed away and died from this virus, we now know that the coverage and the protection and the steps that were taken politically were very much valid. And I now see articles that say, could have been prevented if we'd done more earlier. And so I think it really was the unknown and us not knowing how to respond to it very early on, that in the end, it will be the lesson learned about how we respond, how we push media coverage. I'm not an expert in media, but really looking at this and looking backwards at the lessons learned, both when it comes to media, when it comes to information sharing, when it comes to educating our communities, and also when it comes to political responses to pandemics.
Thank you so much. Councilman Moody?
Yes, like Judge Blake said, I don't want to add to what's already been said or sound redundant, but I will suggest this. I think that that no, the virus was not exaggerated. I think it is a very real threat. But I think that what was not told is the totality of the impact of the virus and some different dynamics of our life. As a municipal legislator, we're seeing major impacts in things like budgets and services and programs for this summer. When we eliminate programs and services for our young people, we see an uptick of crime because boredom is beginning to strike. Parks are no longer open. So I think while there is a very real health threat physically, there is also a huge threat mentally, emotionally, spiritually in our communities. And I think that whole picture has not been told throughout the course of this virus.
Interesting point. I didn't think about it that way, but thank you. So we have 5 months until our November 7th election. What are your thoughts about the future of COVID-19 and the effects that it can possibly have on this very, very, very important election? Very important election. I'm gonna start with you, Councilman Moody.
Yeah, I'm right in the thick of it. Right now, I'm in the middle of working with presidential campaign, trying to get folks to register to vote. Today was the last day for the primary. I'm trying to make sure folks have their ballots and stuff. I am concerned primarily because it's more steps. It's more steps. It's one thing to get folks to get out there and vote. Campaigns already struggle with that, but now it's, okay, we have to educate folks on getting an absentee ballot. Then they have to fill it out. Then they have to remember to send it back in. And productivity levels are down because they've been in the house or they're tired. So I am very concerned about that. And not only about the presidential election, but down ballot races, Congress, state reps, all of those things, where we might have lower turnout in any direction. So I am very concerned, very concerned.
Thank you, thank you. I know, Judge Aretha Blake, you're an appointed official. What are your concerns?
Yes, I am elected. And so I want to just start out by saying, I think you introduced the question, you said November 7th. So let's start with the election is November 3rd.
Yeah. You're
So
right.
let's just, just for clarity, because I want to make sure everyone remembers and kind of gets that date ingrained in their brain. And we're counting down to November 3rd. And I am really concerned about the impact on the November 3rd turnout, and then things leading up to the turnout. I think Councilman really talked about not just the top of the ballot, the fact that we have races all the way down the ballot. And I will say that I'm on the ballot in November. I don't have opposition in November. I had a primary in March, but I'm at the bottom of the ballot. And so if folks are only educated about and interested in the top of the ballot, one of the concerns I have right now is that a lot of media coverage is focused on the top of the ballot. And we depend on local media coverage to educate our local communities about our state races, about our local municipal races, about our judicial races, such that we can have an informed electorate come out. And so when I see the media coverage really focusing on everything that's happened nationally, what I am doing is counting down to the fact that we only have about 5 months until November, and nobody's talking about city council. Nobody's talking about school board. No one's really talking about the judges. We have a state Supreme Court election in North Carolina. No one's talking about how important that Supreme Court election is. And not that we don't need to talk about what's happening nationally, but how do we get balance? How do we as a community come together and say, this is how we are going to make sure that that focus is here? Now, I'll also talk about this. Campaigns locally depend on volunteers at the polls to educate people at the polls who don't get the messages before that. And Alberta, as you well know, you've stood at the polls for me, and I thank you for that. And you know how it is to be one-on-one with folks. And people, if they're going to be nervous about a rebound of COVID come November, then they're not going to want to stand out there talking to thousands of people to hand out literature about the candidate they support. So the question is, how do candidates get creative now using social media and other avenues to educate people before they get to the polls? And then I'll finally say, and I'm going to wrap it up so you don't have to cut me off, Alberta, is to say, this is also having an impact on fundraising. To get the messages out, it costs money. And to raise money, we have to get our messages out to people. We are all used to having, if you're in campaigns, either having or attending fundraisers, receptions, panels and things like that, where you can learn and hear from, touch, and get close to your candidates to really get a feel for them. We can't do that now. So there are candidates right now in prime fundraising season, right? After the primary election in March, and before we get to about August, where they need to raise the money, they can't do that right now. They're trying to figure out how to raise money, having Zoom conferences and things like that. But one, it's not just that we can't get together, but so many people have been economically impacted by Corona, by the fact that they're out of work, by the fact that they've had to take time to stay home, to take care of their children, by the fact that they are depending on jobs that they may not have, they've been furloughed and things like that, that they don't have extra money to donate, even if they have a favorite candidate. And so now you have candidates who are struggling to figure out how to campaign differently. How do you campaign in the age of Corona? One of my campaign team said, I am so thankful we're done and we got it wrapped up in the primary. I am too, because now my thought process is, what would I have been doing? And I have many friends who are still on the ballot, and we're having those conversations. How do you close the gap when it comes to education, volunteerism, fundraising, and then getting to voter turnout in voting, and actually dealing with all the things we're going to have to deal with about people who may not want to even go to the polls?
Thank you so much. Diane.
What she said. I think, the most important piece for me is to make politics local. And, it's really important that people think about these local elections. When we're talking about even the protests, for example, the DA is the key position, and so it's important for us, people ask, what do we want out of the protest? Y'all need to change these doggone sheriffs. You need to change your DAs. We have a lot of power and control locally. And, because of what we hear in the pandemic and the protests and everything else, our attention can only go but so far. And local elections are suffering, but yet the catalyst for change that we're really asking and protesting for. So it's funny that those two dynamics are working against each other unintentionally. And piggybacking on what she said, that Judge Blake said in reference to fundraising, I know that I help local candidates all the time. We have annual fundraisers that we've had to cancel for very capable, diverse candidates. Judge Wendy Hazelton, for example. And how are we going to raise money for her? And it's an important race. And so, it is extremely important that people find ways in their community to get the word out. I don't know if that means us going back old school with emails. I don't know what it means, but I do know that we have a very short period of time to make very critical decisions locally. People ask me all the time about the national race, and I'll tell you, I really don't care, because my politics and my day-to-day life is my local government. So when I have issues with my local police, then that means I need to lobby for a police advisory council, right? So those are city council members that get to make those decisions. When I have a pothole on my road and I need to contact somebody, I contact my city council person. So for me, my politics, most important politics for me, is always local. And it's important that we get that word out. And I really do feel for the candidates that are on the ballot in November with local elections, because it is a tough time to fundraise, not just for us being able to get together, but because a lot of people are suffering economically. And so then you have, this feeling of not even wanting to ask, because you're not sure of what other individuals are going through in order to make it day to day. So how dare we ask them to give $50 or $500 for an election campaign when they can't feed their children? So it's just taking a very negative toll on local elections, and candidates, I really feel for them.
Thank you so much. Larry?
Yeah, I'm excited just listening to the judge and Diane. They hit two great points that I want to talk about. Is all, as Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. And, the things that affect me on a local level are not, as much as I may cringe listening to our president, he's not affecting me every single day What I need to do is I need to call guys like Delvin when I have a problem. And I need to make sure that I have people that are going to pick up the phone and going to answer the phone. We need to make sure that we have a responsive district attorney's office, sheriff's office, as Diane mentioned, but also our county executive's office, our mayor's office. All of these offices, they're the ones that can control the things that happen every day, whether it's as we're talking about right now nationally, the corruption in government. If they're the ones that can seek retribution on you, they're the ones that can make your life hard, or they're the ones that can help you. I think this goes beyond COVID. I think we've had a problem getting people out to vote. Unfortunately, in lower income communities, people are more transient. They don't understand. They have a lot of worries first off in their lives, where they think, and they've been beaten down, oppressed so long that they feel like their vote doesn't count. Now, I could tell you how important it is because I've witnessed it. I lost a re-election one year by 11 votes. 11 votes. And believe me, your vote counts. When I looked at those ballots and I looked at those sheets after that election, and I saw friends of mine, good friends, family members that did not go out to vote that day because they said, oh, it didn't matter. Those votes matter. They matter big. But again, places like Cornhill, people used to ask me, why are you so passionate about it? They don't vote. And they don't understand why they don't. Well, they're there, but they're transient. These people in those communities, and it's not just African Americans, it's an socioeconomic issue, whereas they're moving constantly from apartment to apartment. They don't know how to keep up their registration. So they may try. A lot of them do try to vote. And then they go to the voting booth and they tell them, well, you're not registered here. They're not very helpful with them to tell them where they are registered and tell them to go there to vote. So they end up just giving up and going home. We need to reform, and those election officials are appointed by our elected officials. So we need to really definitely hold these elected officials accountable, hold these commissioners of Board of Elections accountable for more outreach and not just talk.
Thank you. Councilman Moody, I see your hand is up, and then I'm going to get to you, Patrick.
Yeah, my hand, because when Larry was talking, I thought about another point. It's not only the difficulties of voting, but when you have only one option before you every year, the same names before you year after year after year, and they never look like you, and they don't understand your problem, then you're not incentivized to vote. So it's not only about ensuring the importance of voting, but we have to get in position where we can decide the choices that the voters have. And when we put ourselves, it's hard to find good candidates. When you put up good candidates and names of the names, folks were more energized to vote for me because it was a new name that they had not. They knew me, but I was now in a different position. And so I think that's the other side of the electorate. Folks tired of them for the same names that they don't understand, and for the same names that's been in power for the last 50 years. They're not going to come out to vote if your name is on the ballot every year. Right.
That makes sense. That gives me a lot of insight. I know that. Patrick.
Yes, being that there have been already so many insightful comments, I will keep my remarks very limited on this topic. And when it comes to voting, one silver lining is in the tragedy of George Floyd, we've had a turnout of protests that I've never seen in my lifetime. If some of the best elected officials and stakeholders can energize the rage and anger that people are carrying out in the protests and say, vote. While voting doesn't do everything, it can change everything from local politics right on up to the White House. So I think that perhaps is the silver lining in America's other pandemic.
Thank you. Larry, you had another point?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, because those are great points by Delvin and Patrick just now, but to point out why one of the reasons that it benefits the status quo and the system, they enjoy the low voter turnout. They don't want to take advantage of these people. I just want to get that across. They don't want to take advantage of this energy on the streets and get them out to vote. Because if those people come out to vote, all of these young people that are across the country that are out there rallying right now, if they come out to vote, they are not likely to vote for the status quo, for someone that's been there for 50 years. They're going to vote for change. And who does that affect? That affects the status quo and the people that are making these policies that we're protesting in the first place. So we have to do it. We have to find a way. I don't have the answer, but I know that it's upon us. And that's why I'm so excited about guys like Delvin, so young, getting into office to do it and having the, being so articulate that I'm hoping, not to put too much pressure on you, Delvin, but I'm hoping you can engage these people and get them out there and show them how important it is. They can kick these people out. Power is nothing but an illusion.
Right.
They're only as powerful as we let them.
Right.
Sorry.
Thank you. Isaiah, with the threat of COVID-19, will it hinder you going out to vote?
You said would it hinder me going out to vote?
Yeah, on your age group?
For my age group, I think a lot of people don't want to go outside or nothing. But for me, like I've been seeing we don't learn about like voting stuff in school. Like we don't like talk about it that much. But with like the voting stuff, like I think like if you want to change something, you got to go change it. Like you got to like want to make change for it. So like I'm gonna go vote. It's my first year voting anyway, so I'm gonna go there. And, like, vote for it.
Are you going to encourage your friends to go and register to vote and vote as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Claire, you promise?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Gerard.
Yeah, I think COVID-19 certainly presents some challenges to, running a campaign. But I think right now, this is the time to really be creative. We see it in the workplace right now with most people, who are forced to work from home using, platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And with the school system, kids are being educated from home. So, this week, Baltimore had their primary, the mayoral race, as well as the city council race. And I was involved in, doing some organizing there. And what I found in terms of raising contributions, one thing that worked really well was actually having, the candidates would just have their friends host small groups of their sphere of influence on a Zoom call. So we would target, 20, 25 people, and they get the one-on-one time with the candidate. This is like a 30 to 45 minute call. And afterwards, they just, do a call to action for, each of those people on the call to, provide not just, voting support, but financial support to the candidate. And, most of those candidates that use that mechanism for raising funds were reelected.
Oh, okay, thank you. Diane, you wanted to say something?
I just want to piggyback up. Zay said something that was really important, and that was the lack of education about voting and civics at an early age. And so we have lost that in our education system. And then we expect for them to have magic understanding about voting rights and how the system works when they're 18. So, I understand that we have testing and we have all these other things that we've added to our education system, and there's a lot that they have to go through, but we've lost the spirit of voting by not educating our children very young about the process. And that's one of the reasons it's so difficult to get people out to vote or to understand its importance or to understand local government, because we don't talk about it. They're not educated about it. And so we really need to kind of go back and figure out how we can raise voters. You can't turn voters at 18. You've lost 18 years of experience of teaching them the importance of why they vote. So it's really important for us to go back and throw that piece in at a very early age, where we're not just telling them about three, forms of government, but we're also explaining the importance of voting.
Thank you so much. And with that being said, how do we do that? How can we educate and embrace those who don't believe in the voting system. Like there's people now like, I'm not voting. It don't count. What can we do to, I'm gonna go with you, Isaiah, first. What can we do to embrace the youth and educate? What would you listen to if I came to you and said, Isaiah, are you gonna vote? How can I get you to, how can I educate you? And how can I embrace you, your age group, into voting?
I think it would have to be like, instead of like just like giving it to us, like just throwing it to us, like when we turn 18, like now y'all go vote. Like teach us like in school, like actually like teach us what like what's going on, and like you know, like y'all talking about primaries and stuff like that. Like we never really even heard of that in school, like none of that.
Wow.
So like everything,
Wow.
like I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what a primary even is, but
Oh, wow.
like basically like if we like start learning from like a younger age, and I guess like I don't know, like just give it to us like in a way we can understand from like a young age, and then like as we get older, we'll like know how to do it by the time we turn 18. Because right now I'm learning from nothing. I'm already 18.
Wow. Wow, Diane. How do we, I mean, Isaiah gave us some ideas, but how do we educate and embrace those people who don't believe in this voting system?
You know, goodness well, I'm going to say read a book. I mean, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, it's in a book. Whatever you want to know, it's in a book. No, seriously, I think that it's important for us to educate people about how things affect them every day. So I never go into a conversation with someone who's anti-voting about presidential elections. I always ask them what are their current issues and or concerns, and then I turn that into the position that can assist with that. And if it's, you know, illegal traffic stops, then that means, you know, those are appointed positions by your city council, right? So your chief of police. So I try my best to figure out what their issues are, and we all have them. And then I tie that to the position, the local position, that would hopefully give them some insight as to why it's important for them to vote. The other thing is I understand the frustration. I understand not feeling like it matters or it counts. You know, I understand feeling disenfranchised. And I also understand a system that hasn't really worked for the people. We have less number of hours for early voting. We have less polling sites for early voting. People have to work. So, you know, when you say then that they can't go vote on a Saturday or a Sunday, you know, well, who are we really saying that we want folks to go out to vote, or are we protecting, as Larry said, the status quo?
Wow, thank you so much. Councilman Moody.
Yes, I think I think Diane hit on something about localizing the conversation when it comes to encouraging folks to vote. But one strategy that I have always done, and of course I'm no expert when it comes to running campaigns or elections, but I have always tried to help people see themselves in the politics. It's something that I do when I preach. I help them see themselves in the message. And so one of the things that is important for the electorate is that if they see themselves in every policy, if they understand how it impacts their daily life, if they understand to what extent they can have an impact in this particular aspect of politics or laws or legislation or ordinance, then 9 times out of 10, I've seen that they've been more receptive to voting. But, you know, in politics, we call it a collective action problem. I mean, you know, the individual may say that I don't have a voice in and of itself. But if 1,000 of you say you're not going to vote, if 2,000 of you say you're not going to vote, 5,000 you have that mentality, and we spread that, we promulgate that, we perpetuate that narrative, then we got a real problem. And that's how communities begin to not vote. Neighborhoods don't vote because one person says, I'm not voting. The family says, I'm not voting. Cousins and aunties and uncles and them say, I'm not voting. And then that's how we begin to have that spread of low voting in our communities.
Thank you so much. Larry?
Yeah, I think a lot of these issues are intertwined big time. And, you know, it goes back to and trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. It goes back to a conversation I've had with Patrick years ago, me and him have had about racism and how, you know, you can't be, my belief is you know, and I try to tell this and I argue with my friends and my family, you know, they tell me, well, there's black people that are racist. And I say, no, there's not. And they say, yes, there is. I say, no, they can't be racist. They don't have the institutional power to oppress people. If you get mad at somebody, or if a white person gets mad at somebody, they usually have a family line of people that have been police officers, that have been firefighters, and been council members or some sort of position of power in their small community, wherever they come from. And they can actually seek retribution on you. They can oppress you. They could do something to make your life hurt. Now, most black people don't have that. So if they get mad at you, what do? They're mad at you. They can't go and call somebody. And so I guess I'm trying to get back to my point now about the whole voting part is, you know, I grew up in Cornhill. I grew up probably one of the few, I think on my block for certain, the only white person. And, but I had one thing. I had a father who was in politics. So I watched it. I saw it. I learned it. So I am getting, as hard as it is to be, and I'm sorry I'm dragging, but give me a moment here, Alberta. As hard as it is for me to be optimistic in this time, I am getting optimistic by seeing people like the judge who's on the panel tonight and delve in and across the country and doing, you know, watching Barack Obama in 2008 when I had to fight some powerful people in my own party locally because I supported him. They wanted to kill me. But I think we are going to see in the next generation some of that where they've watched that, and it's going to take time. But right now, they have not seen people in their families do this. And so people, you know, like Del, again, not to put too much pressure on you, Delvin, but you're laying the groundwork, my man. You really are. You, the judge, all of you, you're laying the groundwork to hopefully have those families and where they understand it and see the importance. So I think, again, all of this is intertwined.
Thank you so much. Diane, I seen you had your hand up. Then I'm gonna get to you, Patrick.
I was just clapping. I was clapping.
Oh, okay, that was a clap. Okay, Patrick. Patrick and then Judge Blake.
Yes. If I can reference something that Diane said, and it reminded me that the topic and concept of voting didn't really land on my plate till I was right at about 18. And so if you don't snatch people earlier, and I'm going to have to, folks, enter in again the issue of race. The topic of voting was elusive to me and to us growing up. But I remember getting a little bit excited when I got around that age because, you know, whether it was 18 or 21, now you can go vote. But I didn't really know what I was voting for. And I'm going to bring this down, I think, to get poor people, Black people, and I'm even going to say women. We have to remember, and I think the way that you energize and excite people, and if I had a bullhorn for America, there was a time where only, I believe, white men could vote. And if you remind people that there was a time where your grandmother or great-great-grandmother and grandfather had to turn flips, do cartwheels, guess how many jelly beans were in the jar to vote. If you tickle their feathers with that and excite them and get them angry and let them know the importance of voting and that you do matter, and asking people what's important to you. Well, then again, Diane, it's the local politics. You have to get your Delvin Moody's and you know, everything from your school board. What kind of extracurricular activities? Well, you do matter. But when people don't see that, when it's elusive, it's like my vote doesn't matter. And it's easy, I think, for people who don't have power and insight to fall into that trap. I really didn't really understand, and I'm still far from being an expert. Politics is a big game, and yes, Larry, it's a nasty game. That's why I don't run for elected office. And somebody's got to do it though, Judge. So I salute all of you who are doing it. But I understand that I have a role in it, whether I want to or not. Everything is politics, everything. To the local grocery store, to the school board, what kind of extracurricular activities you want in your community for the kids, it's all politics. And it matters on who you vote for and all of that. While that is a personal choice, but the value of voting. And I didn't learn that until late in life. So Diane, again, going back to your point, I think if we start engaging young people, I don't know what age it starts at. I don't know if it has to be 12 or 13 or 14. And of course, it's a stairway case to informing people. I will internalize this differently at the age of 20 than I did at 15. But if nobody informs me about the importance of voting until I'm 18, it's just something that I'm doing, but I don't really understand the impact.
All right. Thank you so much. Judge? You had okay.
Let's start there, because when Zay spoke, I immediately got heavy. And I got heavy because I believe, and I think all of us believe, that's why we're talking about it, that our vote is our power. And so when I hear a new 18-year-old about to go off to college say, yes, I can vote, but nobody taught me anything about it, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm excited to vote, but I don't know how to get educated. No one told me even what a primary is. It made my heart heavy, because we are giving power, but we're taking away at the same time. We're not informing our children and our next generation of leaders about a system in a way that they can actually effectively, with education, use their power and use their voice. So what is the purpose of having it, and why go vote if you don't know anything about it? Why go vote if you don't know who the candidates are? Why go vote? You're going to miss one whole election cycle if you don't know there is a primary. And the primary is the initial election cycle that narrows it down. And so if you miss the primary, so many races are decided in the primary. So if you don't even know what it is or why you're doing it, that it exists, which is why we have very low primary turnout in most places, including Mecklenburg County, then you're not going to show up. So even if you vote in the general, you've lost your power in the primary. Both our DA and our sheriff's races a few years ago were decided in the primary. And if you're talking about wanting to be involved in the justice system and having accountability in the justice system, you might want to vote for the DA and the sheriff. And Diane made that point. And so I guess it makes me heavy, because we think about, how do we get the young people educated? The reality is it is not happening in our schools. When I was in school, it happened. We had a little bit of civics education, but now we're really relying upon our community organizations, our nonprofits, our parents, and the village. Because let's be real. We have to raise all of our children. We have to empower all of our children. I have a daughter, she's 13, and I fully expect that all of her aunties around here are helping me to educate her. And so part of what I think is that when we take that kind of ownership, we can create opportunities to educate our children that may not exist to the formal educational system, because we just can't rely upon that for a variety of reasons. And so the question I have is, what are the messages we tell them? And so one of the messages that I adopted a long time ago is that, and I'll just do the system of justice because it is mine. I tell children that the system of justice belongs to you. I work for you. Your parents may have the vote right now, but I work for you. And when I ran in 2016, that was one of the things I told the kid. I had kid volunteers. Children were out there volunteering at the polls. They didn't know what they were doing, but they know they believe in something. Many of them were friends with my daughter. And so I had a bunch of, at that time, 3rd and 4th graders out there at the polls. They're running around having fun. It was fun to them, but they got involved in the system. If nothing else, they had to know what a district court judge was, what district court judges did, and that you needed to vote for Aretha Blake. That's all they had to say. But they got educated. And then when I won, I brought them all in for a tour, and I toured them around the courthouse to say, this is what you did. You got me here. Your volunteerism, your parents vote. And their parents took them to the voting booth with them to let them push the button for the person they work for. And so it's small things we can do to educate our children that may not be a formal curriculum, but what we need to do to get them excited, in my opinion, is to make sure they understand that they have power, that this system, where the councilman is, where I am, where our school board is, every piece of this system is theirs. It's built for them. It's built for the next generation. We are here to serve. We're not here just to have title and have power, because there's not really a lot of power. There's influence, but the power is in the vote. The power is in the people that get us there. The power is in the people that hold us accountable to do what they set us there to do. And so if you want to have equity in the judicial system, if you want to have inclusion, if you want to have social justice, if you want criminal justice, you got to vote the people in who will get it there.
Thank you so much. Larry, I seen your hand up.
Yeah, I just forgot to mention one thing, and bringing up when she talked about the parade and the kids. I think one way we could try with the younger generation is to show them, you know, as crazy as it sounds and as serious as these jobs are, how fun the process can be, how fun it could be to build a community, that you're doing positive things. It's not, there's a lot of dirties. We've all seen it that have been here in politics. There's a lot of cutthroat stuff that goes on. However, there's a lot of positive too. And you could bring a community together. I always saw that as a fun part, getting into the things. It's hard enough. And another thing would be legally. New York State is notorious for having difficult time getting access to the ballot. And I've heard a couple of comments so far about not knowing what a primary was and things like that. You know, not knowing. I have friends of mine that have mentioned to me when I got involved young, and they said, well, how do you get into politics? What do I have to do? Do I have to go to college for this or that? And I don't think they realize you go get petitions and anyone can get into politics. There is not, if you are an American citizen, 18 years old, you can run for office in your community. But it's so easy. They don't understand that. And it can be fun. Some of these elections in our local community, as Delvin will tell you, they're won with 100 and something votes, 200 votes, 300 votes. Now you're telling me, when I tell that to people, they say, geez, I know that many people in my neighborhood. I know. So go get them to vote, get on the ballot. The reason, well, how do these people win? You know how they win? They're unopposed. Everyone's scared, or they don't run, or they don't know how to run for office, or whatever the case may be, but they become unopposed. Get on the ballot, drag those people to the polls, and you can change it. It's not hard.
All right. Thank you so much. So much. Gerard, do you have anything? Or did I get to you already? But you did? Go ahead. Oh, so Larry brought up a very valid point, and like I said, all the civil unrest and all the need for change. How important is it? Well, I know how important it is for us to see our people in key positions. I'll do a two-part question, and how can we hold our people accountable once they're in these positions? Patrick, I'm sorry.
Sure. Yes, I have a technical question. Can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I see something here that says that my speaker isn't working, so I just wanted to make sure that people could hear me. Back to your question, Alberta. How important is it to get our people in elected office?
Positions, and as well as hold them accountable once they're in these positions.
Yes. Pardon me for asking the question. When you say our people, who are you referring to?
Black people.
Got it. Thank you. It's imperative. And with all due respect to people who are not Black, but the Black experience is extremely unique. There is a hardship in America that you will only comprehend and understand if you are Black. And I say that to all due respect, but it's nice to have insightful people who are not Black, like Larry Tanore, who understand to the extent that they can what comes with it. So how important is it? Black people understand the trauma, the needs, and the potential of Black people. They understand that they have talent, and very often people who have not been down that path, that demographic path of being Black and brown, it is extremely difficult for them to understand the needs of Black people. You know, sometimes people say, and many people from different groups say this, but sometimes, and it seems to me that more white people say it, they say, I don't see color. And when they say that, there's essentially also saying, perhaps unconsciously, that they don't see the racism, they don't see the barriers, they don't see the hardships. So when you are not Black, you don't see the needs. So your question is a good one, Alberta. It is critical that we have people that look like us in office, because you know what Miss Pearl needs over there on South Street. You know the hardships, and then holding the second part of your question, but just because you look like me, and in
That
holding
part.
them accountable, I think that we need to have, it is good sometimes when these elected officials who look like us to have a council around them to check in, to make sure that you are serving us in ways that we really need, because sometimes even the best of us can forget the hardships and the actual needs.
Right, thank you. Isaiah, how important is it for you to see Black officials?
I think it's pretty important because like a lot of times, like no offense, but like white people, they'll say like they understand what we're going through, but that's really like they understand what they think it feels like. Like they don't understand what it really feels like. So like when people like us will be in office, like they actually like change stuff that we need, not what someone else thinks we would want, like thinks we would want, thinks we would need, or something like that. And like I just think if someone is like running for office that's like our same skin color, that we gonna go and try to at least go out and vote for somebody. If not them, at least go there and vote for like something, you know.
Thank you. Gerard? You're on mute.
Yeah, I think the idea here in the U.S. is that we have a representative, democracy or government. And so, our leaders are really supposed to be elevating the voices of the people who are voting. So, for, speaking specifically for poor and working class communities, I think, there needs to be representatives coming out of those communities who are intimately, connected to those people's struggles. And so, getting back to this, issue of voter apathy, I think, people are looking for hope and they're looking for real change. And one way to do that is for, to engage those people in those communities, and as Larry alluded to, really encouraging them to get in the political process and represent those communities.
All right, thank you. Judge Blake.
I think it's just of utmost importance for our community, for our children, to see inclusivity, diversity. I think every representative body should look like the community it represents. And part of that challenge is, I think we talked about this a little bit, getting folks excited to run who haven't run before, identifying new people. We are all in the community. So if you're an activist, if you're involved, if you volunteer, you see people who can step up and lead and bring a new voice and flavor to the community. And as the community changes, sometimes leadership has to change to keep up with that. And so that's why it's partially incumbent for accountability. I mean, elections are accountability. That's what the election process is, right? If folks don't like what you're doing, they vote you out. So that's part of it. But that takes education. And I always ask, accountable for what? And so that requires that the community remain engaged. So you kind of follow someone down the campaign trail, they make certain assurances or certain pledges, say they stand for certain things. So that means once they get in those meetings on the county board and things like that, you have to kind of follow along and see what their votes are, what they're doing, and then be willing to engage in the process. So I think it's important. One thing I've seen a lot of right now, especially, is people writing emails and letters to the city council, or going to their meetings, and the meeting rooms are now packed because people want to get feedback. That's part of it, because things are one way on election day, but right now we have these two pandemics going on and things have changed a little bit. And so now there might be new messages you need to get to your elected officials. So you have to be there to give the messages and give them that feedback, so that in the end, it doesn't say, oh, they weren't responsive to our needs, because quite frankly, one, I do think the elected official has an obligation to be in and of the community, but two, the community also needs to come back and make sure that they continue to communicate their needs back to the elected official.
Thank you. Diane?
I agree with everything that's said. I will add, though, that my challenge to us as a community is to communicate what our needs are. And so we have a tendency to work individually or piecemeal. Very rarely do we work collectively or come to a politician when they're running and have an action step for what is our ask. You know, and I always say that even in regards to the local protests now, like I'm not about marching and protesting unless you can tell me what's my desired outcome. And so, you know, when we say hold them accountable, then I'd say hold them accountable for what? And how did you make your ask? And what was your ask? And so it's really hard to get a desired outcome when you haven't really strategically gone in with what your ask is. And I wish that we would do that more effectively across the board.
Thank you. Councilman?
Yeah, like I just want to say, like I put in the chat, all your skin folk and is not your kinfolk. we had somebody in our community who was Black who publicly said racism is over and it's not a thing. And this person was running as a Black man for state representative, and he was crazy as all get out. So I will say, just because they're Black does not mean, right, that you should necessarily give them your vote as well, because you got to check the politics. But I will say this in terms of being elected, you know, we build these huge trains when we're campaigning. And sometimes what happens is in November, we look back and everybody got off the train because they think that because we're now in the seat that the fight is over. And so, you know, when we're out there are certain things as an elected official that I can do, and there are certain things that would be better with strategy if you brought it up first, and then I carried the water or carried the baton over the finish line. And so that thing about accountability when there's no engagement bothers me. I have folk, I won't get into the issue here, but over a few votes that were really just one vote that I made, and that some constituents did not like, but had no engagement with me about that decision. We're not God, all right? And so we are human beings, and sometimes we have a vantage point. We do our level best, but sometimes without the totality of all your constituency engaging with you, you do the best that you can do as a representative to represent your community. And then, right, which goes back to a point that Diane said, when I was elected for all of Cornhill, not just the Black folk, right? So that means that if I just work in a way only for one subset of the community, then other folk won't vote for me, right? But if you come to me with an ask, if you come to me with the list, if you come to me with what an agenda, then we can carry it over the finish line. And that's not to suggest that that's the only way that it ends. That's not to suggest I'm going to sit here on my hands and say, well, you didn't come to me, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm not suggesting that. But in terms of strategy, I think sometimes we miss that. And I think sometimes we vote, we encourage the vote. But I told people on my campaign, I don't only need you to vote, but I might need you to come to City Hall and just sit there every now and again during the city council meeting and look at them and say, what, I dare you to vote this way, you know? So it's those type of things, you know, we need you to be involved and engaged.
Right. And Larry, not that I think this question is not important to you. I just, for the sake of time, I want to begin summarizing, and I want to get to the police portion of this. So we see that these police have been charged. I have a two-part question and a summary. What more do we need to do? And what justice do we want to see? And where do we go from here? And I'll start with you, Larry. Three-part question.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, and I had my hand raised earlier because that was a passionate, and no, that's okay. Yeah, and I'm fully aware I might be stepping into it as the only white panelist here, but as a former legislator, I have a unique perspective on all that because I had the privilege of being in rooms where people thought they could get away with saying certain things because I was white.
Right.
So, you know, as we are asking, and I'm watching, and I'm happy that we're watching our younger generation holding our white parents and boomers and so on, as we call them, or whatever the kids are calling them now, accountable for their racism. And we're trying to do that. As an elected official and a white one back then, I watched as the people I grew up with, but when I got up to the county ledge and I would be in rooms where it was just me and the leaders, the establishment, the, leaders of the parties and all that, and they would literally warn me, well, we have this guy on our payroll. And I'm not going to name names, but this guy on our payroll, and we'll send them in there to your community to badmouth you, and let's see you win an election. And they did, because my people that, Miss Kalino and certain people that were big supporters of mine would call me and say such and such was at this event badmouthing you. So there's things that you gotta hold those accountable too, not just the elected officials, but people that sit on these boards. Look at all the boards and commissions in your community, and you will see the same names for 30, 40 years sitting on those boards and commissions. What have they done to help the community?
Exactly.
And but back to what can we do? I think the question, and I'm sorry, it's just a passionate one for me.
We're just moving into the discussion about policing.
The policing, I think systemically, there's the best way I could put it is, that you keep hearing this, there's, one bad apple. Well, they don't ever finish that statement, which is, what is it? Spoils a whole bushel or whatever. So, and then until I keep hearing about the good cops, and I don't disagree. There's good cops. I have cops in my family. I have police officers, state troopers, but I tell them the same thing. And a lot of them don't like it. Some of them aren't talking to me. Until you start speaking up and until you cross that line, there are no good cops, period. Because silence is taking the side of the oppressor. And that's the biggest problem, is that you're allowing these people to get away with it. You're not saying anything. You're not speaking up. And then you're saying, well, there's not that many, these are just a few. Well, if they're only a few, why aren't you guys coming out so strongly against them? Why are you defending them? It blows my mind. We need a lot more justice, and we need these cops to come out. So, I noticed, and I'm sure you'll probably get to it, but some of the questions about the kneeling, I feel strongly on some of that, and whether or not they should be involved in these protests or not. But I'll let you get to that question later.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yes, I've been doing racial sensitivity training with local police officers for many years, close to 20. And those police officers sit in the rooms with the people that they serve. And I ask them very pointed questions about the pointed questions that I asked are based largely on their whiteness and their culture. And this is not to make an indictment that because they are white, that they are bad people. But the question is, what does it mean to be white? And what are your relationships with Black people? And many white people in policing, I don't think really understand what it means to be white. And many of them get this wonderful idea to be a police officer, not really understanding the communities that they serve. So what are we going to do about this issue of policing? It is very much about policing. The question that I would love to ask police officers who've made those disturbing killings of Black men and women is, what were you thinking when you killed them? What unresolved issues do you have with Black people? And then outside of policing, pardon me for moving the conversation a little bit forward, but this is about a system and a culture and a climate in America that America has not been held accountable for. And for us as Black people, it is very much about every profession and institution in America where it's predominantly white spaces and how we feel as Black people when we go into those spaces. And largely the history of policing in and of itself was created to keep Black people in check. So I think that we are at a golden moment in America for every police agency and department to do an internal investigation with the communities that they serve, mainly with Black people, and ask Black people how we see their practices in their communities. Am I making sense? And so the issue of policing, it is definitely about those internal, how their policies and their practices, but it is also other institutions of white people who insidiously create the environment for police to do bad policing, because white people do not hold white police officers accountable. And so it is that silence that Larry talked about, and so many other things, that white people commit racism in ways that they're not even aware of it.
Right,
So
right.
we're always looking for the mean, dirty, white KKK person, and often it is people who are otherwise well-intentioned and good, but don't see the insidious, subtle ways, and how much pain they create on Black people.
Right. Thank you so much. Judge Blake?
Because of my role, I'm going to skip over some pieces of that question as I
I understand.
but I do want to focus on just what I've seen as what's next that's been effective. And Diane and Councilman Delvin, I think both said that, and I said the same thing. What I've seen that's been effective with what's next is that in the last few days, I've seen lots of organizations, cities, community leaders, activists come up with a very defined list of expectations or demands, however they determine, to present to law enforcement officials, to present to city leaders and those who fund or manage law enforcement in their respective communities. And so I think that's a good next step, because again, you have to start with, where are we trying to go? What is your ask? And so today, for example, here in Mecklenburg County, the Black lawyers hosted an event, a rally at which they presented their statement and a list of what their agenda is for law enforcement and for the criminal justice system. They're lawyers, so they expanded it beyond just law enforcement, i.e. the police, but also to the entire justice system. Our Chief Justice, Sherry Beasley, issued a charge to us lawyers and to the bar and community, and spoke up in a way that empowered, I think, the judges in ways that we weren't sure we had the power to do so, to really speak about systematic racism, to speak about the role of the justice system, and the fact that there's work to do there. And so I think that opened the door for community conversation around, okay, what does the community expect to see? What is your perspective? And then what can the judges, what can law enforcement do to help to bridge that gap and to address some of those ills that folks are seeing in our system? And the reality is, I mean, just let me be clear, the justice system is not blind. I think Chief Justice laid that out well. We also recognize those within the courthouses that there is work to do. And there are those of us who are trying to do that work. And I think now is the time for the community to come together as a next step to help us do that work, to get your input in, and then to try to, once we get to that point of having those discussions and figuring out what those next steps are, to then hold us accountable to fulfill those.
Thank you so much. And Isaiah, how do you feel about policing in America, and what do you think we should do next?
I think, I don't want to like go on for too long, so I can start like yelling and get mad and stuff. But I think the one thing that we could do is that, like right now, like whenever these like officers are killing like Black people or whatever, whoever they're killing, it feels like they do it knowing that like nothing's gonna happen to them. I think like the one thing we can do is like make it so like if they kill someone, like they were fearful what happened like after they kill like an unarmed Black man or something. Like people are getting on video of them like killing them, and then what happens? They get arrested or whatever, and then they get let back out and nothing happens. You know what I'm saying? I just think that if there was more like consequence for what they was doing, then it wouldn't happen as much.
Right, so you want more accountability on police officers. All right, thank you. I see your hand, Larry, but let me go to Diane real quick. I'll get to you.
Convictions, convictions, convictions. So what I hear Zay saying is that we need convictions. You know, there's always been charges. You know, there have always been charges, and without the convictions, which I know Judge Blake can't say, but convictions, we need them to convict them. And the reason is because without convictions, it allows public opinion to then let them off the hook. It's interesting to me, though, that my Caucasian brothers and sisters who are just joining the movement, because there's been a lot of them, right, in the last couple of weeks, and I'm grateful for their being woke now. That's wonderful. But they have an optimism that we do not in regards to these convictions. And that's just based on history. You know, so we've been in this fight for a minute and have seen all of those that have walked without the convictions. And so, you know, when I'll post something like, I'm waiting for the conviction, but, you know, I'm not throwing a party just yet. They have a hard time understanding that because they're just now getting into why not? Of course, there'd be convictions. So I think that without a conviction in this case, it'll be interesting to see how that changes, if at all, the energy of non-Blacks who have joined the movement. And will they really start to feel our ingrained frustration with the system?
All right. Thank you so much, Larry. So you had your hand up. Then
Oh
Gerard.
yeah, Diane, I think just ripped those words right out of my mouth, and I think the judge can attest to this, although probably can't speak much on it. And I wrote a post on this too, and I'm not sure how many's seen it. This fight is far from over. The arrest means nothing. You remember Simi Valley and the Rodney King jury selection. Jury selection is huge. I'm already starting to see retired cops from Utica and local ones that are posting on my Facebook feed talking about a fair trial. Where will he ever get a fair trial? He's going to get a fair trial. And in America, you deserve a jury of his peers. And that's there in the inner city of Minneapolis. This case has gone national, yes. There's nowhere they're going to move it where nobody's heard of it. So we cannot allow, we need to keep this fight up right now. We cannot allow this to be moved to another suburb full of cops and, you know, white people, I'll say it, who are more apt to let these police officers off the hook. That's the fight right now we need to keep up. No more, not another Simi Valley.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jarrod.
I echo what Ms. Taylor said. Absolutely, we need convictions. I think more long term, I really think we should work toward this idea of, you know, forcing cops to live in the neighborhoods, at least the zip code or so in which they're actually serving. I think this is important for the same reasons that I think politicians should come from those communities, because they intimately understand the backgrounds and the plights of the people that they're, you know, really sworn to protect. I did attend this webinar this week that Obama did with some young activists. And I like, you know, they put a call to action out to mayors and police forces. And it was just, you know, a really, you know, simple 4-step call. Step one was basically just to review the police use of force policies. Step two is basically to engage the communities by including a pretty diverse range of input and experiences and stories from people who interacted with the police, and then report those findings not to like the Justice Department, but directly to the community to get some feedback. And then lastly, reform community police of force policies. And, you know, I think with all of these, you know, any like laws and policies that are put on the books, they really have to have teeth. I always think back to like the Brown versus Board of Education case. And, you know, the verdict in that case was to desegregate schools with all deliberate speed. And that basically meant nothing, right? And so they basically desegregated schools when they felt like it. So, you know, I think we have to make sure that there are absolutely teeth behind this this movement that we have rolling.
Thank you so much. Councilman.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. You know, I am mentally exhausted thinking about how we address this issue in terms of police and community relations. I think first about accountability measures, about making sure that complaints of police officers are not reviewed by prosecutors and DAs to make sure that there's an independent agent to do those types of things. I mean, it's all sorts of ideas. I can run off a whole list of policies and reforms that we can have. But ultimately, it goes back to elections and other things. It is so multidimensional because you need a mayor that's going to make sure to set the tone that chief of police understands that there needs to be a spirit or a behavior in that force and department that is representative of that community. Without a strong mayor to do that, the police chief is not going to do that. If you don't have a public safety commissioner, you have less accountability measures than in other cities. And then understanding the fact that when we talk about the criminal justice system, it's an apparatus with multiple systems within inside of it. Every city is different. Every state is different. I mean, it's not just one system. And so understanding and pulling back that layer of it. But to be honest, what we should do is we have to start the conversation. I know people don't want to talk, and a lot of folks are saying we need action. But I think the downside of it, when we are rushed to move alone, what we have is we have movement, but we don't have any upward mobility. And there's a lot of people on the treadmill of life moving and protesting, but have no mobility for their community. And that requires talking, and that requires a plan, and that requires a vision. And where there is no vision, we all know what happens. And while I share the frustration of many people as a Black man in America, that we need to act now, but I'll be darned if I act without a plan, because if I act without a plan, those who have been in the game longer than me, who know the rules, who made the rules, always know the loophole. And until I study the game, I can't play the game unless I study the game. Until I study the game and figure out my strategy, we'll never have mobility in my community. So the most ontological conclusion I can deduce right now is I don't know. And it's fair to say I don't know, but I'm going to start the conversation so I can figure it out.
Thank you so much. There's so many other questions I want to get to. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I thank my wonderful panelists. I thank our wonderful panelists for participating today. It seems like we still have a lot of work to do. We need to educate our children. We need to continue to empower our people, and we need to embrace our power because we do have some. Thank you once again. My name is Alberta Bell. I am Coffee.
Davis, and I'm Cream.
And thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you all.